Okay, so today we are going to talk about, and I'm not sure if you're aware, but there is an election going on. Voting is on Monday. So we will know who the next Prime Minister of Canada is at some point Monday evening, maybe early into Tuesday morning. So we are literally coming down to the wire. And today we are going to take a deep dive into the specific housing policies of the two main front-running party, which is the Conservative platform and the Liberal platform, specific only to housing. So this will be an interesting conversation. My name is Ralph Fox, and I'm the co-founder and broker of record of Fox Marin. Welcome to the Toronto Real Estate Podcast. And today we have my partner in crime, Kori Marin, joining us. Kori, so great to have you here.
So good to see you, Ralph, and to everyone. I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
So before we begin, I would be remiss to remind everybody, if they enjoy our content, to stay in touch by hitting that subscribe or like button. And if they have any comments, we'd absolutely love to hear from you down below. And if there's anything that we could have done better or anything that we could answer, please be sure to comment down below. It helps the algorithm and helps us continue to be able to push out more of this amazing content. So today is a big day because we are on the cusp of the federal election. This is a big one. Some are saying potentially the most important election of our lifetime. I definitely have my own private thoughts about that, but let's just keep it specific to real estate and housing today. Kori, why don't you share some highlight thoughts and maybe we can start to get into a discussion.
So, I guess the main thing that I want to remind everybody is to get out there and vote. Your vote matters. So, on Monday, if you did not participate in the early polls that happened over the long weekend, Easter weekend, please be sure to get out there and vote on Monday, April 28th. Bring all your friends and family. It really is important to honor that. And we hope to see you out at the polls on Monday. It's going to be a long day Monday. I'm going to have to drink coffee or have a Red Bull or something to stay up late to see what the election results are. Or I can depend on you, Ralph, to just whisper in my ear and let me know the results of the election, because we all know that I cannot stay up past 11 o'clock, but I can easily get up at 5 a.m. So not a night bird, but definitely an early bird. Without further ado, let's jump into this. I think it would be helpful if we formatted this more of a question answer type dialogue, so we can be really clear about what we're talking about, so our viewership can understand the positions around housing policy for both of the two major parties. So today, we're going to focus on the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party. In a former podcast, we really did address the three parties, the NDP, Conservative, and Liberal, and did a longer podcast about their broader policy positions. And then, as Ralph mentioned, we're just going to focus on housing today, and we're going to focus on the two lead candidates and their positions on housing. So with that being said, Ralph, why don't we talk about the bold promises both parties are making for 2025. Specifically, what are they saying when it comes to the number of new homes they plan to build, and how this may or may not address the affordability issue that we see here in Canada?
Sure. Well, one piece to the equation obviously is supply. And in a place where we work and live, Toronto, we are considerably chronically constrained. So what is interesting is both parties are promising to build in total, it will work out to, over a span of 4 or 5 years, 500,000 homes per year. The Liberals are promising 2 million and the Conservatives 2.3 million. So this definitely are very aggressive numbers for sure. I have my concerns with either party actually hitting the supplies that they're saying that they're going to hit, but that's something we can dig into as we get into it.
And compare those promises to what we've actually delivered historically in Canada. And when we speak to these numbers, we're not talking about the GTA, we're talking about national goals in terms of housing starts.
Correct. So typically we build about 250,000 homes per year. I believe the most we've ever built was somewhere around 280,000. So we've never even crossed 300,000. And we've seen all kinds of promises at all levels of government, municipal, provincial, and federal, to exceed that range of 250 to 300,000. It's never happened. So I have my suspicions for a whole bunch of reasons that either party are going to hit these markers, but it is good to see it being an important part of the conversation. And this conversation does play into housing affordability and what the future could look like, depending upon which party and their vision ends up being hopefully enacted.
And staying with housing starts. So, just to be clear to our viewership, that is new construction, both in the condo sector and the low rise sector. So, all housing starts, with the objective being approximately 500,000 new homes per year for both parties. But speak to me about what percentage of those are rentals versus potential homes for buyers to purchase?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we've seen a real shift over the last few years where condo developers are now becoming purpose-built rental developers, meaning that they're finding better opportunities or better returns on investment to build condos that are meant to be rental buildings, and they would hold them for the long term for better ROI than we're seeing in the condo market right now. So we see a lot of pension funds being very active in this market segment. And interestingly enough, of the 250,000 homes that we're building, a couple things to keep in mind with these housing starts. Number one, 50% are purpose-built rental or rentals. So we're only seeing, for a population of 40 million right now, 125,000 for residential living as opposed to purpose-built rentals. And the other thing that's interesting is we are seeing a considerable drop-off last year in the amount of homes that are being built, and we expect this to continue as new construction sales are plummeting to lows that we haven't seen since the 90s. And so this number is set up to contract significantly just based on market fundamentals, the cost to build and the cost to buy residential resale. There's just a huge discrepancy between the two. It's much more expensive to build than it is to buy resale. And it's impossible virtually in Toronto and in most pockets of the GTA to even build low rise, meaning detached or semi-detached. So there's a lot of caveats to this, but none of them are super exciting or inspiring given the position that we currently find ourselves in from a supply standpoint.
And when it comes to the parties' positions on this, if you were somebody who dreamed of owning a home and you were a young person out of school, perhaps you've been working for a few years, do you think that either party would deliver on the promise and the dream of actually owning a home? Like, do you think that you would be inspired by either party's position on this and think this is actually going to be realistic for me? Or is that something that we'll just have to see how this fleshes out in the years to come?
I think in order for that to happen, it really depends on how the economy performs and is there opportunities for people to move up economically, and is there upward mobility in our society and culture? Because currently there isn't. It's actually the exact opposite. So I think that larger question of affordability has much more to do with the economy and where the economy is going under both visions versus specific housing plans to create more supply or to make tweaks on fine tuning, which is really what we're talking about right now, but then we will expand out into the economy as well.
Yeah, like I think I'd be like, oh, that's great. They're going to build more homes. But if I was a young person, I'd be like, okay, there's no way I'm going to be able to save 20% for a down payment. And I know with my current salary and how much it's costing me to rent and how much it costs me to buy my groceries and to cover some of my other overhead costs, even if there is more supply out there, it does seem very challenging to be like, I can't imagine myself getting ahead and into a place where I might be able to purchase one of these housing starts per se.
Yeah, there was a report that came out and said that it takes 29 years for the average person, average Canadian, to be able to save up to afford a down payment on a property. And obviously that's just not tenable. And so we'll talk a little bit about some of the policies right now, and starting out talking about the reduction on GST. Again, that's helpful to a certain degree, but it really isn't going to move the needle with affordability, nor is it really going to deal with what's the real issue, which is supply and overall the economy and upward mobility. So going back into talking about GST, we'll start there. And if we look at what the the Liberals, we'll start with the Liberals, what they have promised, they promised $1 million GST payable for first-time buyers on new construction. So that is helpful. GST works out to about 5%. Now, will that reduction be passed on from developers? I'm not entirely sure. Theoretically, yes, but we'll have to see what the specifics of this type of reduction is. And then we look at the Conservatives' plan, which is a little higher, works a little bit better in the GTA where it's a lot more expensive. And so it's 1.3 million and it's for all buyers, which is really important because a lot of times pre-construction properties are bought by investors because you're buying something that won't be built for, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years, 5 years down the road. And so it's usually investors that drive the pre-construction market. So I do think having that extra bit of buffer in terms of budget and allowing for it to be applicable to all buyers, not just first-time buyers, for a market, especially like the GTA, which is so investor driven and expensive, it's a good way to help get buyers and investors back into the pre-construction market. But is it going to move the needle anytime soon? I really don't think so. I think it's a great talking point.
So, a couple points of clarity on this before we move on, Ralph. In
Mhm.
terms of the GST, when a purchaser buys something that's new, so this is for new construction, and this is inclusive of both condos and low rise. So, we're not just, I think every time somebody says the word pre construction, they automatically go to a high rise condominium in a big city. This is also applicable to new home construction in the 905 and the 705 and so on in some of your suburban areas where you'd be buying of more of a residential property. But can you explain the GST when you buy something pre-construction or new construction in just terms of how that does not roll into your mortgage and how people are dealing with it now, and how this actually will be a savings for first-time home buyers, for liberals, or for all buyers under the conservative plan, just for
Well,
clarity?
it's built into the cost that developers bring properties to market. The way the HST is done, it's a little separate,
Mhm.
but it's built into the cost.
It's built in. Okay, perfect. I just wanted everyone to understand that. Okay, so between the two with the GST, it looks like the conservatives probably have a little bit of a better plan around this particular tax incentive.
For sure,
So,
but will it actually do anything? I don't think it will, especially right now when we're talking such low sales activity in new homes. It'll be a while before it may have an impact, if ever.
yeah, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's not like you're going to wake up and be like, okay, well, now I can afford a home because now I don't have to pay GST because I have the other $100,000 saved. I was just hoping to save up that last 5% for the GST. Like, it doesn't really make a massive impact in
No.
terms of what your dollar can buy in terms of a home or even a starter condo in any area across the country for that matter. So it's not like all of a sudden you're like magically going to have your down payment.
Correct.
Okay, so let's move a little bit over to supply. Let's talk about the Liberals first. And we talked about the fact that they want to build 500,000 new homes over the next decade. And they keep using sort of the terms of the World War II scale of new construction. Can you talk a little bit more about what they're talking about on the supply side and what they want to do with government lands and some of this modular home type building?
So personally, right off the top, I find this to be utterly terrifying. So the concept is they're going to form a crown corporation. The proposal is called the Build Canada Homes Corporation. They're going to build 500,000 homes. They're going to have 25 billion to start with of loans and government lands, all prefabricated houses. There are additional 10 billion for direct spending on affordable housing and low cost loans. So they're promising 35 billion. Now, I'll just tell you, if you do the math, it's not even close to enough to actually build that amount of homes, but it is certainly a big amount, especially for a country such as Canada. But what's interesting is that not only do we have to think about, can a crown corporation build and manage something of this size and scale? Look at the boondoggle of building the LRT along Eglinton, just as an example, which just utterly came to have no timeline or budget.
Yep.
Or look at some of the rentals managed by the city. And and especially when they were selling them off, I mean, they're rat infested, just awful places. So I really don't think that the government can be builders effectively, and they certainly have shown a terrible track record of mismanaging public funds, especially for this type of a project. And then what was also really interesting is they're talking about these modular homes, but it doesn't really seem to be any statement anywhere about those homes being for sale for individuals. It looks like they might just be government rental units. And then the other thing that I find terrifying, of course, is Brookfield's relationship with a company called Modulaire, which are very large scale home builders across Europe. And there does definitely seem to be a bit of a conflict of interest from our current prime minister with this policy. So these are all things that I find very concerning. The idea is that the government's going to step in, solve this problem, build quicker, more efficiently than any developer, and do it at like a super fast speed. And there is no real example or reason to believe that that would be even possible. So it's all really concerning. And, I do think that there could be better ways to bring more inventory to market than this plan.
So, just to summarize, just to make sure that our viewers understand, in effect, the government would become a developer per se.
Yes.
And would they also become the landlord as well?
Not sure. It's not specified who will own the modular homes. Will they go for sale? It's just that the government is going to become a developer and build them at large scale. And just there's so many questions that I have with this, like where in the GTA in Toronto proper is there land to build modular homes?
And then, just again, for clarity purposes, modular homes, just for our viewers out there, are basically prefabs
Yes.
where you repeat over and over again the same style of home or condo or apartment. So it's like a slam dunk design and you just repeat it over and over again. There is like nothing interesting or unique about any of the design aesthetic of these. This is very much kind of like student residence, I think is a really good analogy in terms of what that might look like or feel like. There's nothing sexy about it. There's absolutely no character. And the idea is that you can just rinse and repeat the design and the project so that you can build faster. So prefab is nothing fabulous.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some cool looking Instagram ones, but I have no idea if the government at scale could pull something like this off with any sense of anything working out properly. Like I find this
Oh yeah, the
I find this very Orwellian. So we'll see if the government can actually pull this off and who's going to live in them and where they're going to be built and who's going to own them. But anytime you see these type of promises, generally you see a tremendous amount of waste of money and nothing ever really gets accomplished.
100%. And I just want to say as well that I have certainly seen amazing Instagram prefab
Yes,
cottages and laneway houses and some awesome things out there. So I'm not taking away from prefab for those type of properties, but when building in scale, it does sound a little bit scary and kind of communist. Am I
ask.
allowed to use that word on the internet?
I think you can for now.
Okay, good. All right. So, how will the Liberal Party, in terms of what they're promising around housing, support municipalities? What does that look like?
They're also promising to provide $4 billion over 4 years towards housing related infrastructure so that we can have faster permit approvals. And so zoning will get pushed through quicker. In theory, it sounds pretty good to me. I mean, we should support the municipalities so that they, in fact, at base level, push through more building. How they're going to incentivize this or what type of metrics they're going to put on it, I haven't seen any details on that. But I do think a huge juggernaut right now is at the municipal level with builders and homeowners just not being able to move quickly and have a rational process to get things done quickly. And I think that would be really helpful to opening up supply.
100% it would. It would be a relief. So,
Mhm.
all right, well, we'll stay abreast of what's going on with that. I wish there was more conversation around this and in
Yeah.
terms of the discussions that the media is having with the parties. And it seems so limited in terms of the one English debate and the one French debate. I wish there was probably another opportunity for a debate and a little bit more time because this has just been such a condensed election. I feel like there's a lot of holes still and answers that Canadians are seeking, and certainly housing and affordability are big pieces of that. So,
Absolutely.
only 4 days left. So we'll see if any other details come to fruition in terms of the liberal perspective on this. Let's speak quickly to the conservative policies and
Hmm.
how are they approaching this housing crisis a little bit differently if they are.
I think their approach is actually the exact opposite of the liberals, and their
Okay.
approach is that the government should basically back off and let the market do its job and
Okay.
and more so get out of the way as opposed to directly intervene.
Okay. And how are they looking to A, do that, and B, where are they going to all of a sudden come up with this land where there's the
Huh.
ability for the market to do its job?
So they're talking about selling 6,000 government buildings and thousands of acres of federal land to allow developers to build market and non-market housing. So the government, the Crown Corporation, the Crown holds a tremendous amount of land in its resources. We're a huge country, obviously. And so they really want to put it to sale to the market and have it sold at market prices, and at the same time put on some type of requirements for developers to have market and non-rental market housing available.
Market and non-market housing. I don't
Yeah.
understand the difference
Well, when
between.
I say market, I mean what the market will pay
Okay.
for a property. And then for a developed property, and then when I say non-market, I mean subsidized or affordable homes. So I don't know what the breakdown is, but they definitely making a distinction that they want to have certain amount of government land and properties sold to developers to build affordable housing on. And perhaps they would give discounts and loans and further incentives on that.
Okay. That makes sense. And they are also trying to motivate municipalities, similar to what the liberals are saying. So, can you explain if there's a difference between these two platforms and what those promises look like?
Yeah, so the conservatives are going to cut funding to municipalities that don't increase their housing supply by 15% a year. So what they're really doing is they're really talking about how municipalities are getting in the way of developers and investors from building. And there's multiple layers of bureaucracy and zoning issues. And so they're basically saying to the municipalities, look, get out of the way, or we're going to stop some or maybe even all of our payments to you so that you are now incentivized to go out and build more housing. They call them the gatekeepers. They're trying to get rid of the civil servants and the bureaucrats by incentivizing municipalities to increase their existing housing stock by 15% annually. And then they're even talking about giving bonuses to those municipalities that exceed that mark. So they're putting a metric and they're putting incentivizations and penalties for the municipalities that don't want to grow. And those are probably the ones that typically, like Toronto, tend to need it the most.
And not to sound naive, but in terms of the communication, you may not be able to answer this question. But in terms of the pecking order and this negotiation with the municipality, is this the conservative government talking to the provincial government, and the provincial government talking to the municipality? And this example would be for Toronto, Olivia Chow, or
Yeah,
is
I
it the
think
federal government going directly to Olivia Chow and saying,
so.
get out of the way?
I think it's the latter of the two. And I think it's saying, listen, you receive transfer payments from us. If you want to, this is what you're going to have to do for those payments to continue. And if you hit our KPIs, which is an amazing thing to put on a
Yes.
government and bureaucrats, I think it could be a very helpful policy.
And do you think there'll be friction between
Oh, yeah.
a character like Olivia Chow and the liberal or conservative governments? Or do you
Well,
think
Olivia Chow wants to be a developer as well, and so I think they want to build 10,000 homes. I can't remember the number now, but she's attempting to do her mini version of the liberal plan. So I'm not sure it's really had any effect in its first year, but that is still early days. So I think everyone, there's an old saying by Charlie Munger, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. And I think the incentives are wrong. And I think this is an attempt to try and realign these incentives so that municipalities will actually be incentivized to build and not be held down by all this NIMBYism, not in my backyard, and levels and layers of civil servants and bureaucrats that are holding a lot of development up. It could move a lot quicker. I believe in the OECD, we're second last or something like that for permit approvals, which is just absurd.
embarrassing?
Yeah.
I do feel, and this is just my personal feeling about this, that we're going to need to have a new mayor in this town, in Toronto specifically, to like move through some of this bureaucratic red tape.
Well, maybe we'll be further incentivized if there's a conservative government in place.
And how long does she have left on her term? 2 years?
3, no, 3. I'm
Oh my
counting them.
God.
I know.
It's long. Ralph, you should run.
Yeah.
I'll be your campaign manager.
Perfect.
Okay. Okay. So we've got that covered in terms of municipalities. All right. So when you look at the platform side by side, the liberals and the conservatives, how would you sum up their differences on a philosophical level?
Well, the other thing is about the conservative policy, and I think the liberals actually do have something similar with this. I skipped over it in my notes, but I do believe that they do, where municipalities will be reimbursed 50% in a reduction of development fees up to 50,000. I know the liberals are doing something similar with that as well, so it is important to note that there is some similarities there, and I think those types of policies are very helpful.
Okay. Awesome.
And in answer to your other question, the two difference is really simple. The conservatives are saying essentially that the government should get out of the way and let the free market and developers be incentivized to do their thing. And the liberals are basically saying that the government should be the choice builder of Canada and potential landlord of Canada with building, I think it's 2 million homes in 4 years. So they have a much different vision for our country and how it should be run.
Okay. Very interesting and super helpful just
Mhm.
to look at it from those two big picture lenses. So when we zoom out and look at this big picture, and as you mentioned off the top, Ralph, we have to talk about the overall economy. And as I keep
Yep.
referencing, like, so what? We could build all these houses and sure, they could
Yeah.
be built by the government or sure, they could be built by private industry. Regardless, affordability is still a major issue. And then you reference back, well, the economy is the biggest problem here. You know, young people are still not going to be able to afford a house, even if they're built. So, speak to me about the approaches. Let's start with the conservative first,
Mhm.
conservative side, about their approaches on the overall economy. Just broad strokes here, just to give our viewers the highlights.
Well, just sort of start with where we're at. Our GDP 10 years ago was that of Singapore's, and today we're barely above Luxembourg, which is number 38. 37, we would be 37 out of 38 in the world. So in the last 10 years, our country's GDP, which is a very important number because it's broken down per person, has increased 0.5% versus the United States over the same time period, which is 10%. And 10 years ago, essentially, our living standards of living were at parity with the United States. And now we've fallen down by 40%. And our loonie also is indicative of the drop of the productivity that our economy is producing. So we're not in a great situation. And I think a lot of the frustration around the housing situation, say taking supply out of it, is that we've had tremendous amounts of inflation and currency debasement, not going into it too much, but as a result of excessive monetary printing and debt, which has basically made it really, really impossible for people to move up the food chain, for people to have upward mobility. And that's why we're seeing so many young people not just leave Toronto, but leave the country, which is really, really heartbreaking and rather unfortunate. And so that's the situation that we're in right now. And so, really, when you're talking about affordability and housing, it's more about understanding what can be done to rebuild our economy, which has just been so beaten up over the last 10 years with the liberal government. It's the truth. Like, I'm trying to be as impartial as possible, but everything I said just now is completely factual.
Yeah, I was talking about this at the gym today, and I was talking about with one of the gentlemen that I train with, and we were just saying, like, remember when you just didn't feel guilty living? You know, like you would go on vacation and you'd be able to at least pay for most of it in cash and then not just feel this horrendous stress about going away or going out for dinner and then feeling really guilty about having an extra glass of wine because you're like, that's going to be like $25, you know, because the margins are so insane. Or, you know, buying your groceries is just absolutely devastatingly depressing. I just am like, I cannot believe, like, just Ralph, between you and I, what we spend on food. And it's just you, me, and our dog. Like, I just don't understand how people who have 2 kids and a small family and are living humbly in a starter house in a nice community are affording to live.
Mhm.
You can feel it. And it feels like, and I've said this to you so many times, it feels like we've taken like 3 steps backwards and we're working
Yep.
4 times harder. And you can feel it emotionally, you can feel it mentally, it's exhausting, and everyone just seems so stressed. But I can understand why.
Exactly. And so, the Conservative Party is not been in power for the last 10 years. And so they have a little bit different viewpoint as to how we got here and what we can do to change
Okay.
the situation. I don't believe that there's a magic bullet, but I do think that there's a lot that could be done to help change the situation. The first thing is get rid of Bill 69, which the Liberal government wants to keep. Open up pipelines, let it rip from coast to coast,
Hmm.
figure out a way to make it work. We're number 3 in the world in oil. We're number 4 in liquefied natural gas. We have the number 1 stores of uranium. There's so much good that we could do by shipping our natural resources around the world. We only contribute less than 1% to pollution regarding the climate. And yes, we might create more pollution by bringing out these resources, but once we ship them around the world, we can give India a way that they can burn liquefied natural gas instead of coal. We
Like
can do
China.
really good things with our energy and our natural resources, which we are so blessed to have. We're the number 1 country with proven natural resources. And so that's one thing that the Conservative Party talks about is why aren't we accessing them? Why does no one pay income tax in Saudi Arabia, but yet we're taxed at, 53%? It
Mhm.
makes zero sense.
It makes
And
0
so,
sense.
and so that is first and foremost on my mind. But there's some interesting things that the conservatives are talking about.
Okay.
I love the rollover capital gains or the deferral of the capital gains. And this is something that exists in the United States. And I think it would unlock so much investment and opportunity in our country. So essentially, if you have a property or you have a business
Mhm.
and you sell capital equipment or land that you've been owned and been holding on for 40 years, as long as you reinvest it back into Canada, back into a Canadian company, back into creating more homes or more jobs, that tax, that capital gains tax gets deferred or pushed down further down the road. And it has to be done within a specific period of time, but that will unlock so much frozen capital, which you're basically penalized for selling. And so people will refinance and pull out equity and then use it for other lifestyle things rather than actually sell property or reinvest back into companies or other companies. So I think that's a huge, huge one. I also think TSFAs, I think they increased the limit for $5,000 more dollars
Mhm.
if you invest in Canadian companies and keep your money here in Canada rather than buying US stocks and equities like Google, for example. So again, I think that's another great policy. I'm all about lowering income tax, so reducing
With it.
tax by 15%. I'm all in. And they're actually talking about capping immigration, which has been a huge issue. We're all for immigration. It's the lifeblood of any capitalist democratic society. It's so important to be multicultural, but having a population grow by 1 million people in a year for a country our size, regardless of how much land we have, is absolutely insanity. And we are all collectively paying the price for that runaway immigration. So I think having a cap, as far as I understand, the conservatives are talking about tying that into housing creation. So if we have built 250,000 homes, that's how many people we will let into our country. So I think that's another brilliant conservative idea with actually talking about capping it and tying it to one of our most important resources, which is homes, which we need to make affordable. It doesn't help us if we build 250,000 homes and our population grows by 1 million people.
Yeah, and no
So
one can afford anything.
exactly. And then they're very much talking about investing in trades
Oh,
and
yeah.
really, really encouraging the trades who build everything in this country and building it back to a building based economy and society, which I think is fantastic. And that's
I
why they're getting all the support from all of the unions, which is something typically you would never see in the past for conservative parties. The amount of unions that are standing with the conservatives, it's pretty interesting to see.
Oh my gosh, if we were to start all over again, Ralph, we should both get our electrician licenses and start our own electrician company and then just do all this amazing marketing and branding for it with killer customer service. I
Yes,
think
the
that would be,
customer.
I know. And then we could
Exactly.
have just an amazing business. But I don't know if you and I are very hands on or good with stuff like that. So probably not the best to go into the trades. You and I can't even paint an accent wall together. So I don't know if we would be the best at that. But I think there's incredible opportunities in those sectors right now.
So, okay, we're going to talk a little bit about the Liberal
Yes, let's
platform.
talk about the liberal approach. Same thing, just sort of the broader strokes about their economic story and their intentions related to the housing sector.
And again, this is a much different view of where Canada is at, how we got there, and where they think we're going to go. And so, again, I'm really, really, really trying to be bipartisan here, but talking about this logically makes it very difficult. So I apologize for any people who may hate me for questioning the wisdom behind a lot of these policies. But the thing that's just terrifying to me is the Liberal budget. I mean, they're talking about economy our size of spending $250 billion in 4 years. That makes absolutely no sense. I know they have some justifications for it and different accounting tricks to make it not seem as large as the number that they're purporting, but it is $250 billion.
It's investing, Ralph.
Yeah, investing. That's it. And we all know where that ends up. And, we just have to look at the experience of COVID. When you have government spending that amount of money, what happens? Prices go up. It causes inflation. It causes currency debasement, whatever you want to call it. It's the same thing. It encourages unaffordability. It encourages more debt. It encourages money printing. I mean, just even where we are at today, the interest payments on our current debt exceeds how much the federal government pays the provinces in transfer payments for healthcare. Our interest payments today are more than the cost of healthcare, and they want to take that debt and increase it by $250 billion. Now, it will be very stimulative. Think what happened in COVID, but what'll happen is there's a big sugar high, and then there'll be a crash. And I'm really, really concerned what this type of spending is going to do. It'll be really good for asset holders. I think if you own properties, because of the debasement priced in Canadian dollars, which is something to point out, it'll really drive up prices. I think it'll eviscerate the middle class, and it'll make the wealthier and those who hold hard assets that are scarce continue to be more appreciative or will go up in value because there'll be more money around chasing it. And so I think if the Liberals were to get in power and bring in this kind of debt and spending, and this is just what they're saying they're going to do, let alone what they actually will do. And to give context, this is something like $130 billion more than what Justin Trudeau did while he was in power over the last. So it's quite concerning. I really don't see any good in it. I think there'll be a sugar high. I think if you have assets, if you own real estate, if you're a boomer, this will be very helpful. But I think for anybody starting out, anybody young, anybody trying to have upward mobility, I think this is going to be really, really bad. And so I think this is going to be harmful to affordability when it comes to housing, because I just foresee everything getting more expensive. And I don't see wages keeping up with that expense.
And what about the immigration policy that we spoke to on the conservative side? What about the
Yeah.
liberal promises around that?
Well, I have concerns. So I haven't seen and been able to find any numbers or any statements specific to what they're going to do with immigration. If you're watching this and you've seen some or have some information, please share. But the concern is there's a lot of people in Mark Carney's circle, Mark Wiseman, I think being one of them, that were also very influential with policy in the previous Liberal regime under Justin Trudeau. And all of the same ministers, they're all still there. Some of them have left and come back now that they see strength in the polls. And so I do have concerns in tandem with all this spending that we are going to see a lot of mass immigration come back. And I think, again, it will be highly inflationary into the detriment of a lot of hardworking Canadians. And I'm really sorry. I'm trying to be impartial. I'm trying to find logic here, but we just have to look at what has just occurred in our country economically and from housing pricing. And I think we're going to run into a lot of trouble if these platforms promises by the Liberals get enacted. Now, is the Conservatives going to be a silver bullet, and is it all of a sudden everything going to be fine? No. But I do think it's a much better path. It's the longer path and the harder path. But I do think it will allude to greater opportunity over time, and it will be more reminiscent of what Canada was like when we were one of the strongest economies.
A couple things. One is earlier you said magic bullet versus
Mhm.
silver bullet, and I just wanted to
Mhm.
clarify, isn't the magic bullet
Yeah,
like a protein shaker
yeah,
thing? Okay. I just
it
wanted to
is.
I was
It
like,
is. It
okay,
is.
just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
And then one last thing I want to talk about, and we didn't
Mhm.
really plan on talking about it, but I do think it's interesting, and it does relate back to housing, which is the theme of the podcast today. And just to talk about the internal policies Horizons of Canada report that came out that you
Oh.
briefly referenced at the top of the podcast. And it's titled, I'm going to read it right here. It's titled The Future Lives Social Mobility in Question. And the
And
report forecasts.
Kori, so just who did this report? It's important to talk about who this report was authored by. Was it like a special interest group? Like it came from the
It comes under the federal government. It's one of the federal government's organizations, but are not necessarily reflecting the official policies position of the Liberal government, but it falls under the Liberal government's banner.
it actually came out of I believe the Privy Council from the Prime Minister's office is my understanding.
Yeah, I have maybe it depends on where you read it and how it's framed.
True. Okay. So anyways, for argument's sake, let's just say, because this is interesting discussion in and of itself,
Yeah,
let's just agree that it came out from the federal Liberal government, and they were doing a projection as to on the current trajectory,
yes.
what would Canada look like by 2040 on
Yeah,
my 40th birthday?
exactly. So I'm going to read some of these things and then I want to talk about it and then I want to relate it back to housing. So here it says upward mobility is nearly extinct, with few believing they or their children can achieve a better life through effort. Education becomes a privilege of the elite, serving mainly to preserve social status. Home ownership is reserved for the wealthy, with renting further deepening class divides. Wealth and opportunity are inherited, solidifying a neo-feudal society reminiscent of land barons and aristocracy. AI and automation reduce the value of human labor, exasperating economic collapse. Social class becomes isolating, with algorithmic dating apps and online spaces filtering interactions by status. Families, this is the part that just blows my mind, resort to foraging and hunting due to government and corporate failure in meeting basic needs. The report concludes that if it's left unchecked, these conditions will trigger a mental health crisis, emigration of talent, so people leaving the country, and collapse of Canada's social fabric. Like, I feel like when I'm reading that, I have tears in my eyes. That's terrifying.
Yeah, and the thing that's really terrifying about it is, yeah, the language and the pictures, it's has a lot of shock value to it, and so it's easily dismissed, but it's kind of already happening.
It
If you're
totally
young,
already is
if
happening.
you're young and you're in Toronto and you're buying a property, the down payment is most likely, or even the entire purchase price is most likely coming from your parents. Like in Toronto, that's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's feudalism. Like that is feudalism happening today where generational wealth is being passed down through real estate. So it's not an extension to see that if there's not a course correct continuing, and we are seeing it really difficult for people to have mobility here. It's getting harder and harder. And that's why we're seeing so many people leave. Like I tell this story how one of the agents, Ruben, if you're listening, shout out, on our team who was renting out a condo for one of our clients. And he had previously rented it out and put a great tenant in there. And he was just doing an inspection as we were going to relist it. And that tenant told Ruben that he was leaving. And he was 27 or 28. He was relatively young. And he was an engineer, and the states would take him. And he was offered almost the same amount of money But because of the quality of living and the life standard and the lower taxes, he was able to move and feel that he had better prospects for a happier future by moving to the US. Like, that's happening today. That's not talking about the future. And
Yeah,
we're
it's not
seeing
like
this, we're
40.
seeing
Yeah.
this all over. And I just don't know, in an environment, unless we have a lot of change, how this is going to be rectified. But I don't feel like we're on a great path. And it often feels like in an election like this, that a lot of this is being missed by the media and a lot of this is not being talked about. But it's something that we see and experience every day. And we can say, well, I can't believe the idea of people foraging for food, but yet we have 2 million Canadians every month visiting. Uh, um,
And there are people that are already doing it by the fishing in the rivers and
yeah,
everything like that already. And the thing that makes me the most sad about this, I mean, all of it makes me sad, is the feeling that people cannot improve their lives or the lives of their children through effort. And maybe this is just my personality and having just such a strong work ethic for myself. But there was 2 decades of my life where effort actually paid off. And I was happy to do the work because there would be a reward at the end. And so, I mean, you might have heard this story before, but the reason I was able to buy my first condo is by teaching fitness classes part-time on top of my full-time job. And I would teach the class and bank every single dollar I made from those classes, and it went into a separate bank account. And over 4, 5, or 6 years, I was able to save enough money to put a down payment on a pre-construction condo. And yes, it took me forever, but the effort paid off. And I was actually able to do that. And I was able to do that before I turned 30. That is like not even an option now. Like I used to think, oh, it's because people don't want to work hard enough, or they're not willing to take a part-time job, or they don't want to bartend at night, like how we all did that. And we live with roommates and that's how we did it. That is not the case. It's actually impossible. The effort is not going to get you anywhere at all. And it's just going to stop you in your tracks and deter you from trying because you're not moving anywhere. And it feels like you are swimming against the tide, which is just horrible. And that's where I can see the outcome of the mental health crisis. Like, what's the point?
it's true. And I read this paper. I can't remember who it was by. And I think it was based on a book that the author wrote. And they talked about happiness. And they said that happiness is really the ability to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And they found that it didn't matter what your income level was, as long as you were moving forward, as long as you saw that every year there was progression, whether you were making $10 million, $1 million, 500,000, 200,000, 20,000, 45,000. As long as you were progressing, there's a feeling of accomplishment and self-worth that so much get tied into not the monetary part of it, but the part of actually seeing the efforts of hard work and vision and risk paying off. And it is so evaporated from society. And I think that's also why you're seeing this divide in this election, where you have the older generations who get their information from legacy news and who have done very well by this system, who bought a house, talking about housing, for $19,000 in 1990, and now it's paid out and it's worth $2 million, $3 million. They're good, but it's everybody underneath them that are really struggling. And I think the older generation just doesn't really understand how much things have changed with our monetary system, with the debasement, with the debt, the excessive printing, with the socialization of our institutions. It's not the country that it was. Again, like I really didn't intend on this conversation going down this path, because we always really want to be optimistic and positive, but and non-divisive. But it's really, really hard when you see it, you can't unsee it. And when you talk to people who are hurting, and when you see the challenges that we're all facing living in Toronto and living in Canada that were non-existent not too long ago, it's really, really concerning. And we've just sort of, there was I don't know the full details, but there was a shooting at Pearson
Yes.
today. A couple police officers got shot. There was a shooting in not High Park, in on I forget where it was, on Bain Street in Riverdale last week. And all of this has now just become the norm. People getting their car stolen multiple times. We're This was a city where not too long ago you could leave your door open and not think about it. And all of these things have now become the norm. Something really is broken, and we need to hold the people that have caused this accountable. And we're just not doing it right now.
I totally agree. And just, I believe with the Pearson shooting, it was actually the assailant that was shot, not the police
Right.
officers.
But still, like,
Oh,
when
no,
did
it's
that ever
horrible.
happen?
No, it never happened. I know we were talking about this earlier, and I was saying to you the other day when I got up really early and I was going to take our dog, who happens to be a 100-pound Rhodesian Ridgeback and is intimidating to some, even though he's a teddy
It's
bear,
big, baby.
big baby. But I was like, oh, I'm going to go grab a coffee. And then I was like, I don't really want to walk outside by myself at 5:15 a.m. because it's scary now. Hello. When have I ever said that to myself? Like, I'm like, oh, I'll just wait for Ralph and go with him because I don't want to walk alone in Toronto at 5:15 a.m. on Bloor Street where it doesn't feel safe. Like, I've never had to worry about that my entire life. Like, I zipped around on the subway when I was in my teens, going to ballet classes and auditions and all of this stuff. And it was never a problem to be in the city alone as a kid. And now I'm like, Ralph, can you come with me and the dog? Because I don't want to walk outside by myself. Hello. That's crazy. I know we got totally sidetracked today.
Yeah.
So if you're still with us, thank you for listening to us. But
Yeah.
Ralph, is there anything you want to, just to go back to the housing piece, just a few last summary sections on that, and then we'll close off for the day. And of course, if anyone has any comments or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Anything you want to tie this off with?
I think we have a huge systemic housing affordability crisis as well as an economic crisis. These are true crises, by the way,
Yes.
in Canada right now. And I think if we had those fixed, a lot of the issues coming out of the US would be quite negligible and we would be on much more solid footing. So I think the real thing is to know that no politician is going to fulfill all their promises and no platform is going to solve everything. But I really just want to say to anybody who hasn't made it to the end of this ramble here is that this is a really important time and an opportunity to have a say in where you think the vision of our country should be. And there are two very different visions in front of us. And there could not be a more important election or time to make a statement. So it's really important that you do that. And I think that would leave you in a position where whatever the outcome is on Tuesday, to at least know that you tried to have an impact on the future direction of our country and that you have a vested interest on its success.
Well said. Thank you so much for all of you that stayed to the very end of this diatribe. We
Yes.
appreciate it. And of course, please make your comments below. No matter where you stand on this issue, we'd love to hear your perspective. Ralph and I are super, super open-minded about these things. So
Yeah.
please feel free to do that. This is a community here at Fox Marin where we're always open to innovation and ideas and perspectives 100%. Thank you so much for this, Ralph, and this great discussion. I learned a lot as well. So thank you for that. And we'll catch you next week.
I think I shed a tear.
Oh, I almost did. I almost did.
Please be sure to hit that like or subscribe button. We'd absolutely love to hear from you. And thank you so much for tuning in. And hopefully we haven't offended too many people.
Thanks. Bye-bye.